Good morning and good day, everyone. Welcome to Fit into the Cloud, the podcast series brought to you by AVM Cloud, a time company, the cloud for the enterprise. My name is Srinivas. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for AVM Cloud. We are excited. We are excited to bring you this sixth episode of Fit into the Cloud. And first of all, a very happy new year to all of y'all. Yes, 2021 has been a challenging year. Let's look forward for 2022 and make it more fun and adventurous. Going by it, we are going to bring in some new stuff this episode. We're going to speak about sovereign cloud. Wow, that's not a new story. It's an age-old story brought together by US data laws, European data acts, data sovereignty aspects, and other things. This is one of those clouds that came into picture a few years ago. And today we're going to speak about this particular topic with none other than our most esteemed strategic partner, VMware. Today, in conversation with me, will be a gentleman who kind of heads this part of the business unit in VMware. And I'll let me not waste any time and bring on our guest today for this episode, Kishore.
Hi, Srini.
Hey,
Thank
Kishore,
you.
thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you so much. Welcome to the podcast series of Fit in the Cloud. We are honored and glad that you made, you agreed to have this conversation with me. I know it's a short time, but it's fun to have this conversation. Like I do with all my guests, I don't normally introduce them extravagantly. I leave the guests to give their adventurous way of introducing themselves. So, Kishore, all about you. Who is Kishore? Why do the audience or the viewers need to listen to Kishore?
Oh, wow. Thanks, Srini, first of all, for inviting VMware, and then I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you. Obviously, one of our best partners in the region. Very quickly about me. I am essentially the director for solution architects across Asia Pacific and Japan. I'm based in Singapore. I've been in the industry for more than 22 years. And I've been in Asia Pacific and Japan, regional sort of roles for more than a dozen years. That's basically given me a very good perspective of, how large corporations work across the region, across, different,
Absolutely.
geographies and,
Absolutely.
jurisdictions, etc.
Right.
My previous stint was with EMC 15 years, where I worked with very large organizations, global organizations.
Right.
And hey, guess EMC was a lot about data, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so we were always in the center and the thick of things and front and center when it came to data and
Right.
data privacy and all of those things. So
Right.
yeah, so this is a great topic, and I'm really glad that AVM is, I guess, one of the first, I think, discussions that I'm having in the region. So really glad to be
Yes.
here and talk to you about software.
Oh, we are glad and we are honored to have you on board on this particular episode, Kishore. And with your introduction, what it also brings to the picture is one, I'm damn young. Ah, I'm blessed. I'm young, but it also brings to the front that we are in conversation with a really tenured and kind of legendary aspect that comes along with you when you speak about data, its importance and its criticality. So let's not waste any time. So what I would like to do is straight head into the conversation about sovereign cloud. Uh,
Sure.
we kind of had this conversation a few days ago, right? Which is about it's easy to speak about why AVM is looking at becoming a sovereign cloud provider with the help of VMware. Obviously, VMware is strategically putting all their force behind all their partners to try and see who can be certified as a sovereign cloud provider. But before
Yeah.
we get into sovereign cloud, why how someone can use that? How does the market look at sovereign cloud? I thought it is very important for us to understand first aspect of what is sovereign cloud and why did this even come to the scene of into the scene into the whole regional aspect of things. To be honest, one of the things that I speak about when I start reading about sovereign cloud was interestingly, it is not a new concept. It's been there for a few years. It's been there in other parts of the world. It's just that some regions took time to understand the importance of it being there, right? And a lot of these discussions around sovereign cloud comes because of data and cloud sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
And it has gained that momentum over the past few years, right? Key important considerations why it gained importance is uh, data related laws in different countries, uh, the scrutiny around data, uh, obviously the dominance of the hyperscalers, the big fours, which are, I mean, like it or not, they're US based. Obviously, the fifth one, which is LA Cloud, is a different aspect. But there is a data locality, which is a great aspect, which is a very important reason. And whoever consumes these clouds resources and put their data in, the low visibility and control of that. Now, this is my understanding of what is sovereign cloud and why sovereign cloud. It is ideally to address these concerns. Is
Yeah.
why sovereign cloud came into play. What in your
Yeah.
aspect is sovereign cloud? Before I go to the dictionary definition of sovereign cloud and state out something from the thesaurus. Yeah,
Yeah. Look, and we in the IT industry are pretty known for taking a word and creating 100 meanings to suit our products and services. So I wouldn't be surprised
definitely.
if sovereign cloud had the same future. But
Right,
let's talk about the origins, right? First, and I think and I think you've basically touched all the important aspects of sovereign. So I think you're right. What I would love to do for the audience really is maybe lay this out in a maybe a little bit of a historical perspective, right?
right. That'll be
Um,
good.
I, yeah, I'm a history student, so I think
That's
history
good.
defines us
Right,
kind of. So um, I think in my mind, this is like you said, this has always been there.
right,
The challenge that we face is with as increasing digitalization, right?
right,
This is impacting both personal data and corporate data and national data. All three data sets are increasingly more digitalized, and when you have increasing digitalization of information, you obviously start to get into more national security concerns,
right,
privacy concerns,
right.
confidentiality, intellectual property concerns, etc. So I think with this whole, and again, I'm going to use a phrase that's used to death, but digital transformation, as more and more companies do this, they realize that they are now exposed to these sorts of risks, right?
Definitely.
So if I was to look at, I guess, one wake up call that I remember, it was in 2013 when one of the U.S. courts ordered Microsoft to share emails related to a narcotics case, but the emails were stored in Ireland,
Right, right, right,
and that really started, I think, people thinking. And then, of course, I think, like you rightly said, the understanding of this facet of data was sort of different maturity levels in different countries, and every country had some laws, right?
right,
But the culmination of that, I think, has been that with the increasing geopolitical friction, right?
right.
With these, every country now starting to learn that, hey, because of COVID, I got to look at supply chains. Because of COVID, I got to look at genomic sequencing data also very differently.
Right.
um, every country is now starting to raise the bar when it comes to sharing of any of sort of data, whether it is national
Definitely.
data, corporate data, right?
Definitely.
um,
Definitely.
and therefore you see now the sovereign cloud that we talk about is essentially a reaction to the cloud computing trend, to the increasing realization about how important data is, and
Correct.
also the realization that how important it is to protect that data. Right.
Definitely.
So I think if you take all of these things together, sovereign cloud working with our partners is how we are trying to address this newfound realization of what it means to be really digital.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So
So
I'll pause there. I know I spoke a lot, but I'll just pause there.
no, but you spoke the right aspects, and I will come to your history part because I've got my own gist of history that I would like to provide on sovereign cloud. But I'll hold that. Before which, I think what is important for us to get a clear understanding is sovereign cloud is just not about data locality. The definition
Yeah.
has evolved over a period of time. It's also about data processing. Where does the data get processed using APIs? Could be anything, right? Where does it get processed? And the important aspect of sovereign cloud today is just not about having the data residing in its own country, but also the ability to process that and extract the results out of it within the same country or region. That has become one of the main aspects of why there's importance given to
Yeah.
the sovereignty aspect of data. It's just not about if does the data reside within the country or the region, It's about,
Yeah, yeah,
are we
yeah,
processing the data within the same place? Are we securing the data to the extent possible, to the farthest extent possible? That's, I think, one of the main aspects of sovereign cloud that we are trying to understand, right? Now,
yeah.
what we're going to go quickly is, like I told, I'm going to hit the history lesson a little. I'm going to take a cue from you, and try and see if I can actually do this really well. Now, you mentioned about 2012,
13,
2013, correct?
13. Yeah,
Uh, Now, I do know of a national cloud project called Andromede, if I'm not wrong, which was in France in 2012. Um, that was a failed project, to be honest, because there were a couple of two clouds that the project got split into, Cloud WAT and Numerit G, and uh, so a lot of things that happened in that era. But in 2020, Microsoft set up that dedicated German cloud in 2015 and
mhm.
decommissioned it in 2018 due to again, there are lots of projects that came into the fray, lost traction over a period of time, but then there are certain acts that brought that came back. And as recently as a couple of years ago, GAIAX Foundation, if I'm
GI,
not wrong.
GIX. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
GIX. Yeah,
and that is an infamous project, really, which has actually brought sovereign cloud to a much effective realization today. And a lot of people are part of that project, where they're looking at
yeah,
how do we bring in cloud solution providers together, how do we bring in high computing performance computing aspects together, how do we create laws governing it, how do we create policies governing it, how do we bring in such compute infrastructure. I'm also, the history dates back to a lot of these countries, let that be France, let that be certain parts of Europe, to be honest, right? And France project is one of the major things that actually flew dropped a few times. And not to forget the US Data Act in 2018, which kind of opened up a lot
yeah,
of doors and windows. Now, how many of these? I know VMware was part of a few of these projects. At least for the past few years, VMware has been very active in the other parts of the world, trying to understand how do we put the right kind of aspects into this sovereign cloud. What does VMware's say in all the history and the current situation of sovereign cloud? How do we see it evolving? We're going to touch a lot more depth into it, but I would like to hear your quick view from your history of sovereign cloud.
yeah. Yeah, so I think yeah, you touched upon some of the, I guess, important milestones, right,
Yeah.
in this, and I want to add one more to it, which I think was 2 years ago, which is the Schrems Schrems 2 case in
Yes.
from July 2020.
I forgot
So
that.
that
Yes.
was probably another one watershed moment, I guess, where it opened people's eyes. But look, Europe has always been more active when it comes to privacy laws, right? And
Correct.
more active when it comes to protecting sort of European data with GDPR, and, all of those things. There's now a European Data Protection Board as well that you might have heard of. So
Correct.
as somebody that has, let's say, 80% of the open systems market share, we were always one of the people that was on one of these boards, the technical advisories, and things like that. So it is
Definitely.
with GIX as well, right? So we have members on the technology side of it, on the so we have, and in fact, the one of the key things to remember is the implementation of sovereign cloud um, uh, is by and large local, right? So it's
Correct.
local service providers, right?
Correct.
And most of those service providers are, cloud provider partners for VMware.
Right.
So if you look at the founding members as well, most of them are, what we call VCPP.
Correct.
And that's how we are always involved, whether directly or
Definitely.
indirectly.
Definitely.
But specifically in this case, we are, with our sovereign cloud initiative, we are also going, you know, more steps down the road, I guess, where we are talking about a framework of how does somebody do this, what are the things to look at,
Right.
and how what kind of a technology architecture is required, and
Right.
those sorts of things. So I guess we are involved a lot more this time around with
Right.
GIX and the resulting sovereign cloud initiative
Right.
than we have been in the past.
Right. So, Kishore, does it also mean sovereign cloud is a trend that enterprises are embarking on. And what do you think? Before we go into really what is sovereign cloud, how does VMware really make it happen? We will touch on few areas of that, and how does a local cloud provider like us become part of the whole story? We will get to that. But before that, I would like to understand: is this a trend? I mean, because there's no point in talking about something that's way down in the future. Probably I don't even know how old I might be. Is it that way
Yeah.
down, or is it something that's happening right now? And what should the
Uh,
enterprises really look for when they look
yeah.
at this trend, adopting this trend?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a trend in that sense, where a trend is referred to as something that's just somebody, everyone else is doing, and so I got to do
Right,
it, right? So out
right,
of whether it's out of fear of sort of missing out, FOMO, or no, I don't, I don't think that it's a trend in that sense.
right,
Um, I believe, like I said, it is we have come up with a solution to very current issues,
right.
and people have already, like you said, people are already aware of these issues. They
Hmm,
already
hmm,
doing things to
hmm,
mitigate those risks, etc.
hmm.
What we are now coming up is a way to do this in a more institutionalized and industrialized fashion with our
Definitely,
partners, right?
definitely,
I guess it's, yeah, it is more, I think, a formalization of the need rather than a trend.
correct, correct. So you right, you rightly said it's more about FOMO. It's not about fear of missing out. But do. I do see, because in the market, when I speak to enterprises within this country or region, a lot of enterprises stressing on the fact of data locality or data sovereignty as such, right? Now, for them, I think, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there are some of the key points that enterprises need to consider if they're looking at they're looking at sovereign cloud. Again,
Yeah,
the kind of stuff that I'm speaking about is one, um, GAIAX trends in the Europe. Watch out for it, because it might be at a very initial stage. Because just a couple of years ago, in fact, it's just about 2 years ago, it formalized into a project. A lot of things that are happening within the project. There will be significant traction towards it, and the enterprises should proactively understand what is happening in that part, right, of that project. Two is factor in the political angle into your future cloud strategy. It's very important, especially within this part of the world, in the region, because
yeah,
this part of the world, there are enterprises which are just stationed in the region. So you need to be really understanding your political angle to it. I'm not going to speak about the infamous ban in the US of a particular company or anything about it. I'm not going to talk further into it. Everyone knows what's happening there. But it's important to understand the political environment of your country, whether or not it could pose risk to your existing cloud strategy. Is there, are the laws enough to help you implement this kind of a cloud strategy? It's very important to understand. That's two. And I think three is the technological flexibility in the cloud architecture. How is the cloud architecture flexible enough to bring sovereignty as a key aspect of your strategy? Do your hyperscale providers give you enough uh, strength within their architecture? Let that be licensing prices, let that be stack services, let that be contractual terms, uh, the infamous egress traffic charges. All these need to be considered. Do you think these are very important considerations, or do you think, Srini, these are just the beginning of it? There is so much more to sovereign cloud, and we will discuss that, and we will be glad to hear
yeah.
that from you.
Yeah, no, look, of course you're right. I think all those are important aspects, and we can talk about our sort of framework that we think of, because sovereign cloud is not a solution you buy sort of this box
Correct.
and you're sovereign, right?
Correct. Correct.
So there's a whole framework around guiding principles, best practices, and all those sorts of things to meet the requirements. And it has to be a framework because every country is different. The
Right.
way they define sovereignty is different
Right.
from some other country that defines sovereignty. And like you
Right.
said, it depends on the political landscape, geopolitical
Definitely.
concerns.
Definitely.
So we believe a framework is the right way to keep that flexibility. So you
Correct.
plug in sort of local requirements into that
Correct.
framework, and then come
Correct.
up with, okay, this is what our definition of sovereignty means. So every
Right.
corporation has to go through that process
Right.
as well. Now,
Right.
what I would like to mention is a couple of, I guess, foundational concepts, right? Because I
Right.
think without those concepts, this further conversation will probably be very hard.
Definitely.
The first and foremost is when we talk about data, we are talking about two kinds of information.
Correct.
One is customer content, right? So it's your
Definitely.
content, it's your
Definitely.
database, it's your information.
Right.
And then the other is metadata or account information, right? And you'll be surprised at how many people have control over their own content, but have no idea about how their account information is being used. Things like logon names, usernames, your
Right.
IP addresses from your where you're logging in, your locations, you're probably linked to social media history, etc.
Right.
So that is usually protected with just a privacy statement. That's not really considered to be your ownership or your information, right?
Right.
So it's good to think that, okay, first of all, there's two sets of data, and then the second aspect is which you spoke about is the residency, which
Right.
we consider that if the data is within the physical national boundaries of my jurisdiction, then that's we call resident data. But that's one concept. And then data sovereignty, which is related to the source of that information, saying if it's my citizens' data, then I should have total control over it,
Correct.
no matter where the data physically is. So residency is related to physical locations, GPS coordinates, basically, whereas sovereignty is related to origin and source of the data.
Definitely.
The example I like to give is something like a country having embassies in different countries, right? Those
Definitely.
embassies
Definitely.
are in different countries, but the embassy
Right.
itself is considered sort of your sovereign territory,
Sovereign.
right?
Correct.
Local
Correct.
police can't just like go into your
Right.
embassy,
Right.
right?
Right.
So sovereignty extends beyond boundaries, physical boundaries, right? National
Correct.
boundaries. So that's a very important concept to first understand, that sovereignty is different from residency. And then when if I take these two concepts, the customer data and metadata, and sovereignty and residency, then you come up with the actual requirements in terms of a cloud strategy,
Definitely.
right? Because typically cloud strategy is related to, hey, can I transform this application? Should I retire this? All those 5 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours, whatever
Correct.
the hours are, right?
Correct.
But yeah, one of the main things to consider is sovereignty now. Right? There's an S there
Right.
now. We've moved beyond the
Definitely.
R's to an S.
Correct.
Is like, hey, if I, like you said, if I send this data out for processing,
Correct.
how am I impacting my sovereignty framework?
Definitely.
Or
Definitely.
residency framework. So those I think are very key concepts to consider, and that is why any enterprise looking at cloud strategy has to now look at geopolitical landscape, sovereignty laws, all of those things. We will get
Definitely.
there. I think it's early days,
Right.
but I think with awareness we will get there.
Definitely, definitely, and no doubt. I mean, you touched on great points, which actually will bring to the important aspect of how VMware's own sovereign cloud program really is shaped. Right. I lo- I've been part of VMware. I've been part of VMware for
Yeah.
8 years, so I know what the Epic 2 values mean. And it's a huge aspect of how VMware runs its business, not just for the customers, but also internally and with its
Yeah.
partners too. And that is where I think all of that you mentioned fits rightly into the sovereign cloud's environment, social, and governance strategies that
Yes.
actually align very well into the Epic 2 values of VMware, right? Especially, I'm taking this from right from your sovereign cloud program website and trying to piece that together and tell it to the tell it to the audience here, right?
Yeah.
How does VMware give back to the community? It's just not about bringing out technology enabling partners within the country or the region to go and build technology aware or digital transformation aspects and build strategies, great strategies of moving the country forward digitally and all of that, but also trying to keep the national growth and development aspect into picture, align your cloud providing program into that. And that's where VMware is using its cloud provider partners, which is the VCPP partners, to try and see how do we address the ESG, which is the environment, social, and governance strategies of a sovereign cloud, and how do we come up with a great provider program. Now, um, it will be very wrong for me to go and pitch about how VMware cloud provider partners are the right people or right companies to go and make this whole national growth and development, because we ourselves are a provider partner. I think it would be right for you to touch base on why VMware cloud provider partners. What is VMware's angle of putting a sovereign cloud
Yeah.
program with VCPP guys? Why?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way you, I think brought out the, VMware epic values and, ESG, because I think ESG is a board level,
Correct.
topic right now. And I think this kind of falls into, governance side of that.
Correct.
Uh,
Correct.
but, if you look at Europe, for example,
Right.
and I'll use Europe as example because I think they're the ones right now taking the most steps from a,
Correct.
cohesive action perspective.
Correct.
So the Center for European Policy Studies had recently talked about saying that 92% of the Western world's data is in the US, located in the US or with US companies.
Correct.
Uh, Now, European leaders are looking at that, and they're going, we are going to be completely dependent on anyone who holds this data. And the recent gas crisis is also sort of made them
Correct.
aware that
Right.
when
Right. Right.
some people say data is like oil, well, guess what? You have a gas crisis right
Right.
now.
Right.
So the important thing to remember is this isn't about just privacy. This is about actually national economies.
Correct.
Because if you are not able to keep your data with you, if you're not able to
Right.
share your data with trusted parties, you can never be part of an ecosystem. And if you can't be part of an ecosystem, there really is entropy, right? You
Correct.
will basically you will never grow. You
Right.
need that ecosystem to be able to leverage the data to create innovation out of data analytics and insights, etc. So it
Right.
is this realization that finally this is going to be an economic issue, I think,
Correct.
which is now driving the governments to look at sovereignty very, very seriously. Of
Correct.
course, geopolitical tensions is another factor, but
Right.
boiling it boils down to economics. Is how how we look at it now.
Definitely.
Thinking of the economy itself, when the economists look at this problem, they say, guess what? If I have to keep this data with someone, why wouldn't I actually keep it with companies that I have jurisdictional authority over, who are legal
Right.
entities that I can control, right?
Correct. Correct.
And if I can do that, then I also have this other effect of creating local jobs and
Correct.
increasing the economy through building of more data centers.
Absolutely.
All of those economic effects of having a very good telecommunications infrastructure.
Correct.
And guess what? Who is in those countries and who's building those data centers is actually the VCPP cloud providers, right?
Definitely.
So that's how VCPP has become so important, not just to VMware. I mean, you can look at our investor calls over the last few quarters. VCPP gets a mention every time because that's
Definitely
what
does.
customer and partners and governments are telling us, that we need somebody local, right? Somebody who
Definitely.
understands us and somebody we can control with our
Correct.
laws, obviously.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that, I think, short, I guess, answer.
Definitely, and that's the right picture. And you spoke something very important. How does the telco providers and data center creators, or space creators, work with the cloud providers to bring in the economic effect into the country? And I think that's where AVM is rightly placed with. I can speak. I've been speaking about for the whole past year about Times acquisition of AVM, but I think that's where it is. We are rightly positioned to do that, and we are glad that VCPP is given that importance by VMware to drive
Yeah.
this at a country level, at a regional level, and providers like us who have the envisioning of wanting to expand within the region, having the wish to create in country specific cloud data centers, which makes a lot of difference to the whole conversation of sovereign cloud. Because what is sovereign cloud providers, what is their commitment is, one, to ensure data privacy and privacy and compliance, um, helping the customers to get the benefit of the cloud, while also meeting the changing privacy laws and all of that. There are regulations and laws which govern this whole process, but how do we ensure that we are geographically there, helping the customers to benefit out of such provider programs. And that is a great aspect, right? And what do sovereign cloud providers, if VCPP providers go on to become the sovereign cloud providers for VMware, and all of your VCPP providers really go on to become that, then there is a whole thing about data sovereignty, data residency, data access, jurisdiction, control, all of that are met, right? To ensure that customers' most sensitive data is managed securely, which is a great aspect. Now, moving on to the real aspect of VMware's sovereign cloud provider program, right? I think this will be this particular place is where we would love to see AVM part of that whole provider list that you already have, who are sovereign cloud providers across the globe. We know we are working endlessly to ensure that we are there, which is a process in itself. But that also means VMware is not just making every VCPP provider out there as a sovereign cloud provider. There are reasons why there needs to be certain capability from the provider to be able to be given that status of being a sovereign cloud provider. Now, we'll go into this in stages. I think one of the first things that I would like to understand, and also the viewers to understand, is what are they looking for in the provider capability? What
Yeah.
is VMware looking at from a VCPP or VMware Cloud Provider program? Whoever is a partner in that program, what is the provider capability that you're looking for to make them a sovereign cloud provider, to give them that status? Let's address the provider capability, and then we'll speak about the customer benefits.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think so. One thing is, no, it is not the intention that every cloud provider in the current, what we call the cloud provider program is, a sovereign cloud partner. And sovereign cloud is still not a program; it is still an initiative for
Right.
us.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
I stand
and
corrected.
yeah, no, this is a, I think because it's easy to get into the program versus, why, but the lawyers can better explain why it's a, initiative
Yep.
and not a program.
Right.
But the initiative really is seeking to work with like-minded partners
Hmm.
who to some extent already have the mind share with
Hmm.
relation to sovereignty in their countries, right?
Right.
Because again, we have no illusions that we are experts in what sovereignty means. I
Right.
think our partners, in fact, have more expertise than VMware because they
Right.
work with these governments day in and day out, and they
Right.
understand what the local dynamics is
Right.
there. So I think we look to partners that already have serviced governments or regulated industries in that country, because then they understand what local certifications are required. What does it take to run something like this? Because, like I
Right.
said, it's not just something you buy off the shelf and you're
Definitely.
sovereign.
Right.
One of the key things, for example, with I guess a level of sovereignty is the infrastructure needs to be operated by certified personnel. And when I mean
Correct.
certified, I don't mean technical certifications. I mean background checks, security checks,
Right.
citizens, etc.
Correct.
So that also becomes a big factor in looking at partners, because they have to
Correct.
bear the overhead, I would say, to
Correct.
be implement this. Now, uh, if you look at data, like I said, sovereign cloud itself, it's a framework, right? And
Correct.
I guess some of the guiding principles within that really are, and these again translate to criteria, Srini, that's why I mentioned these, is data sovereignty and jurisdictional control of the entity itself. Is
Correct.
the provider a legal entity that is
Correct.
subject only to, and the keyword is only to the
Correct.
jurisdiction of that country?
Correct.
That's a very key, because you could otherwise be forced by a foreign government
Correct.
or a foreign court to share
Correct.
information. So that's one of the like basic sort of requirements.
Right.
And
Right.
then we're talking about data access and integrity.
Correct.
Access means, do you may be legal entity, but do you have the right, tier 3 data centers? Do you have
Correct.
two sites? Can you offer access even when networks do go down, right? So there's
Correct.
access, there's integrity. Do you offer backup solutions? So
Correct.
it starts to translate into technology solutions, but
Correct.
there are legal reasons for that.
Definitely.
Then there's data security and compliance, where we're talking about ISO 27000,
Right.
or other local certifications. So ISMAP in Japan, or
Right.
IRAP in Australia.
Right.
Every country, by the way, is bringing up their data protection laws. Some start with privacy laws for consumers because that's, I guess, easier, or they feel that's a bigger issue right now.
Right.
But quickly translate into corporate data, government data, etc.
Definitely.
India, for
Right.
example, has a set of empaneled partners. There's
Right.
a list of partners, only they can host government,
Definitely.
workloads,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So that's the security and compliance aspect of it. And then you start to look at data independence and interoperability, which is great, but I don't want to be locked into you. So can I
Right.
move out, without sort of breaking my bank?
Correct.
Can I actually change locations within your cloud, so to speak, physical locations, without incurring huge migration costs?
Right.
And the other aspect which you had brought up some time back is, I will still need to share this data. I have to
Definitely.
be part of ecosystem, right? Like you said,
Definitely.
I can be the consumer of the data, I can be a processor of the data, or a producer of the data, right?
Correct.
But so I will need to be part of this ecosystem. Therefore, will your cloud help me interop? Can
Definitely.
I actually interop with other clouds,
Definitely.
to actually share the data securely? Again,
Correct. Correct.
um, depending on the, what do you call, the controls that you need to operate to the level of data, whether it's confidential, restricted, public, kind of data. And then
Right.
finally, it's data innovation and analytics.
Right.
Can Do you offer me something that I can now then start to analyze, aggregate information, create the data lakes, warehouses, etc., in a secure fashion, while still meeting all these other requirements?
And also
So I
to
think that's the
understand where,
framework.
right, and also to understand where is my data going, what is my data being used for, giving an analytics around that is a very important aspect, especially in a data governance
Yeah.
model.
So if you look
Right.
at all of these things, it's a pretty stringent list,
Correct.
that we look at, and
Correct.
it is not a, yeah, it's not. I wouldn't call it trivial for
Right.
someone to become a sovereign cloud provider and
Right.
to run.
Right.
I mean, you could do it once, but to keep it running,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So just to understand it a little more, layman terms, possibly for the viewers, because both of us understand these very well. But for the viewers, a provider capability that VMware would look at would ideally be how much of a legal entity you are and jurisdictional control you have when it comes to
Mm,
sovereignty of the data and the cloud provider, the cloud providing solutions that you offer.
mm,
Obviously, and also the data center locality. Where does the data center sit? Is it very much within the country? How are you connecting it? Obviously, most of these providers are there across the region or across countries, but how is your interconnects really? Like you rightly mentioned, data should be processed somewhere, and the consumer could be somewhere, the producer of the data could be somewhere, and connecting to multiple clouds is definitely in the picture too. But how do you provide that visibility? How do you provide that controlled access to all of these? How does your personnel who are working with the data, working with the cloud infrastructure that you put up for your consumers, for your customers, how are they legally bound to the country, and how are they validated that they have the right access rights and stuff like that, which is very important to how you all are visualizing the provider capabilities, right? Now,
yeah.
if that is right, what do the customers get out of it? Now, let's say you all go ahead and identify within your VCPP providers. You all obviously are not saying all VCPP providers will become a sovereign cloud provider. It's not taken for granted. Obviously, they meet these profile capabilities. Now, once they meet the provider profile capabilities, what is it that the customers benefit? What do our customers, let's say AVM Cloud becomes a sovereign cloud provider, what do our customers benefit out of it?
Um, so I think, as a long time ago during this chat, I think we mentioned that, it is a formalization of a need, right? With this initiative, what we're trying to do is formalize and make surface these requirements. And
Right.
I think, obviously, there's two things that need to happen, for customers to truly make use of this. One is, as you said, trend following, and, well, if I'm a regulated industry, I'm a government, I just need a sovereign cloud, and that's end of the
Right.
story.
Right.
But I think what's more important is customers who truly have a data classification strategy, who
Right.
really understand what sort of information they have and what are the implications of collecting, storing, processing, or displaying that information. They will be then in a better position to implement a more tuned cloud strategy.
Right.
Because this is not for all workloads, right? Your
Right.
canteen menu doesn't need to be in sovereign cloud.
Definitely.
Right? So, this is not about I am, let's say, a healthcare institution, so everything I have is no. That's not the point.
That's not the
You might
point.
probably
Yes.
be taking too much expense,
Right.
catch too much operational overhead.
Right.
So I think those two things need to be there for a customer to really make leverage this. But from
Right.
a benefit perspective, we think as a principle here, it's our job to educate our customers
Right.
and reduce the risk for our customers. Because if you understand data classification, if you implement your data cloud strategy properly, you as a company are at lesser risk,
Definitely.
both from public scandals where you've lost few million records that you
Right.
shouldn't have lost,
Right.
but also because you're in that correct ecosystem where you're sharing data in a secure fashion, it will accelerate your innovation cycles, because
Definitely.
you're no longer now bound by someone's opinion about whether using cloud is secure or not. Hey, guess what? We brought this cloud, brought
Right.
sovereign to it, and that
Right.
means you can reliably use trust this sovereign cloud. So I think
Right.
those are, at a high level, those are the advantages.
That's really clearly articulated, Kishore. Uh, to be honest, I would love to pick your brains on so many different things of what VMware is doing towards sovereign cloud, but I think in the interest of time, we try and keep the viewers' attention within the limited span. Otherwise, we can keep talking and viewers can go to sleep by putting it on.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so in the interest of time, what we're going to do is, we're going to get into some final thoughts from you. Now, this is where normally I ask my guests a few questions and tell them what is your final thought around this. But I think for this one, I would like to do it a little different. Uh, uh, Normally, what I do in my final thoughts is ask the guest, how do you see AVM partnering with you to do something great, kind of stuff. But what I'm going to do here is move it around a little. Ask you, what should AVM look at from the market aspect? What should AVM look at from the customer segment aspect to help them with their true sovereign cloud journey? What is it that we should do?
Yeah, I think, and again, this is where the partnership aspect comes in, right? AVM knows the market much better than us.
Right.
What we are now working towards is giving a better lens to
Right.
look at the market at, right? We now have a very tuned lens in terms of sovereignty, and AVM is in the right position to be an important player within the data economy of Malaysia, right? So if you stand from that position saying I'm an important player in the data economy, all sorts of ways you can help customers.
Right.
There are commercial customers that that need for sovereignty. Again, we're talking workloads, not like a big bang thing. There are
Correct.
government agencies, there are regulated industries like healthcare,
Right.
banking.
Right.
um, all of these need help with deciding what should go where, which is finally the
Correct.
question the CIO struggles with.
Correct.
What should go
Correct.
where?
Right.
And then once that's there, okay, I know what should go where, but then who's the best? What's the best place to go there, right?
Right.
And that's how again AVM can help with that decision, saying this is why we are the best for sovereign, right? And
Right.
by the way, I also have other types of commercial cloud
Correct.
computing services
Right.
for your other workloads, right? So
Correct.
I think it is being that person that helps customer on that journey.
Right.
On Yes, I looked at cloud computing in a 6 hour way before, but I'm now looking at sovereignty as a S. And how
Right.
do I go on this journey? And hey, guess what? AVM is certified. AVM
Right.
has the right people,
Right.
and AVM has the right technology in partnership
Right.
with VMware. So
Right. Right. So, thank you so much for giving us that view, and it kind of aligns into how we look at ourselves, envision ourselves to be, interfacing to the market. We want to be that trusted cloud provider partner to our customers, which means to really work with the customers to identify where do they need to put their workloads, what are the considerations they need to make, and this will help us strengthen that solutions that we provide to customer. It's not just about telling the customer go on to any of the four hyperscalers, go on to our own cloud solutions that we have, computing solutions that we have. It's just not about that. But whenever you have that real need of real requirement of keeping your data intact, securing your data, keeping it within the country, we are also enabled and certified to do that. Now, having said that, obviously, to the whole of this market and the viewers, we are not yet certified. We are working with VMware to build that certification along the way.
Yeah,
VMware is really looking in depth about our profile capabilities, all of those that Kishore mentioned a while
yeah,
ago,
we're in the
right?
process. Yes.
Yes, yes, and it's very important for us to go through that, and it's important. Why? Because when we go out and speak about sovereign cloud and our customers embarking on that journey, trusting us as the provider partner, we should have the right capabilities within us, and we rightly agree. So, Kishore, we are
Just
we are honored.
just Srini. So sorry for interrupting,
No
but
worries, no worries.
I thought I can't, as a principal in a technology company, I should use some, terms, right? So if you look at this term called multi-cloud that's doing the rounds
Right,
right now, essentially that's what AVM does, right? You become the
right,
person who helps with the multi-cloud strategy, because what is that multi? Some people think it's multi as in just which different providers, but
correct.
multi also has another dimension, saying what are the multiple data classifications I have and how do I suit a cloud to that. So
Definitely.
multi-cloud
Nail on the
strategy.
head. Nail on the head. Yeah, now, absolutely, absolute right aspect of it. Multi-cloud is just not about multiple providers. It's about multiple places or multiple considerations that your data needs. And rightly said, so Kishore. And on that note, it was wonderful having you here, Kishore. I know, we could have had longer conversations about this. There's so many things that you would like to share as well. We hope to bring you back, provided once we go through the process of becoming a sovereign cloud provider from VMware, then we would love to have you back speaking in depth about how does AVM go and help the customers in getting onto that journey. On that note, thank you so much, Kishore,
Thank you.
for joining me in this conversation. And to the viewers, thank you so much for watching us. I know it was a very different kind of a conversation, not technology, but more of governing laws and US data acts and European data acts and stuff like that. But that's what we are here for. We are
Yeah.
here to give a different aspect of what is happening in the market, why someone needs to adopt it, and we'll come back with many more. Keep watching Fit
Yeah.
into the Cloud. We'll come back for more soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini.
Thanks, Kishore.